Shalom, family.
Shalom, family.
We are here to deliver a message for you today. We're hoping to close out this series. It's been a long series. It's been almost a year. And we see during the time that we've been delivering this message, it's been like in a 2 month period. Every 2 months, we would drop a new uh, video concerning come out from among them and be ye separate. And in this message, we're trying to get through to our people that we need to be separate. We need to seek the counsel of Yah and do things according to his will and not what's in our own heart or following the world. And as we've seen, there's a lot of things that's been happening. I know we all been recognizing some of the things that's been happening to our people. They're very hurtful, sorrowful. There's a lot of people who have a lot of questions and they're beginning to question. And this is part of the process. I spoke before about how pain changes things. And so as we are watching the pain that our people go through, dealing with some of the assumptions that people have provided and the deception that they give as far as everyone's the same and all these kind of doctrines and things, we see that there's something different about you. You know, as Pastor Kelly would say, yeah, there is something special about you, and you need to know, despite the skin tone and all these kind of things that most people can clearly point to, it's about that bloodline. It's about having that blood sprinkled on you in the covenant that was made. So we've been talking about Lisbon and we've been talking about the connections between Lisbon and the United States. So we want to go over a few things and then we're going to try to get back into finishing up reading the book and going over a couple of things as far as the witnesses and things that they saw during this traumatic period in Lisbon. And so, first of all, I wanted to touch on some of the things concerning 20-year cycle and how um, this 20-year period or 21 years between the collapse of Lisbon and the establishment of the United States. And so I want to read over a few things. Y'all forgive me, I have some new glasses, so um, trying to get my eyes adjusted to these frames. So let's start first with reading about some things concerning societies. And this is from basically, what is it? AI. This is AI kind of thing, okay? So this is some of the information it comes up with. Societies move through four repeating 20-something year eras called turnings, which together make up a roughly 80 to 100-year cycle. Now, as I told you, once Lisbon collapsed, the British government needed another cash cow, and they found one in the United States because they were willing to do some of the same things that Lisbon was doing. Most of them were involved with slave trading. So we got another topic concerning this, and shout out to the brother Steve for sending some information that we're going to mention here. Hopefully, we can get a little bit deeper about this information the brother sent. So let's talk about the mechanisms. The mechanism that allow human trafficking to persist and eventually evolve into the modern dynamic of wealth and expatriate movements points back to the legal frameworks of the Atlantic world and the Pacific historical connection between the United States and Lisbon. Number one, when the United States Constitution was drafted in 1787, the founding fathers directly utilized a 20-year cycle to delay the moral crisis of the transatlantic slave trade. Under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, the federal government was strictly prohibited from banning the migration or importation of people until the year 1808. So, in other words, they was making a window so they could import slaves. Then it says, the intent, the northern delegations hope that a 20-year buffer would allow the slave system to gradually phase out naturally. Reality. Instead of declining, the 20-year window caused a massive spike in trafficking. The southern states spent those 2 decades aggressively importing tens of thousands of captive Africans, YASHAR'ELites, to maximize their labor supply before impending deadline. So once they kicked that in, they were importing more and more of our people. This is one of the things that once the deadline kicked in. When the deadline kicked in, it started this thing which we use in colorful language. They call it mother effing. This practice was something that was instituted once they couldn't bring any more over there. They started getting males to sleep with whoever they could get till they produce another child, and therefore continuing the trafficking in states. And now that's some wicked, evil thing. But this is what these Christians wanted to do, and they did it. So as we continue on reading this document, there were some disputes, and some of the disputes involved mostly Portuguese and Spanish ships. In the United States, they would use their flag to continue to slave trade because these are the countries that were still heavily in the slave trade. So they use these false flags to continue to bring slavery over here, right? Lastly, in this document, it states one of the dramatic disputes between the United States and what would be the Portuguese maritime law concerning slavery. And that one is the one that they put in the movies, and you probably heard of it. It is the movie Amistad, in which I've used it several times to point out to some of my family members that, hey, these guys on the slave ships in the movie, they was called the name Yah and praising Yah on the ship. So I would use that just to show, listen, I'm not speaking Hebrew. I'm just telling you that's what his name was. So it's not strange to find that document here because that wasn't the only one. There was the Amistad of 1841. There was the captive of the brig Echo in 1858. The forfeiture of the Wanderer in 1859, 1858, 1859. And then there was the 1862 United States against Nathaniel Gordon. And these are some of the disputes concerning the ties between the United States and Lisbon. So as we were saying before, there's no way you can have the United States without Lisbon and their collapse. They had not collapsed. It would be no United States. And to further enhance it, I mentioned the brother Stephen, who's a good friend of ours, sent this name, and he sent a little thing concerning, and this name was Hyman Solomon, right? And one of the things I was doing in research, looking at it, is this guy was a Sephardic Jew, right? And he was from the area of Poland, and what's his name? Poland. And the thing about this guy is he lent money to many of what the United States would call their founding fathers. He also supported them in their whole fighting for freedom during the revolution. So this is some of the things that he was involved in because, during that time, the most lucrative trade was the trade of our people. Yeah, there was other goods and stuff, but the most lucrative one was slave trade. And I can't help but wonder was this is some of where his money came from because this guy was never paid back. So as usual, they borrowed the money, but they never paid him back. So this is what he said. In short, Solomon's money came from international trade and currency brokerage in Europe and in the American colonies. Uh, he facilitated financial work networks through different governments. He knew many different languages. And so there's a story talked about how, the United States government didn't have much money. So George Washington said, go get me Hyman Solomon, in which she took a loan out from him, right? And then there's quite a few others. There's James Madison, there's Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Baron John von Steutenberg. All these people borrowed money from the same guys. So it made me think. And I wrote this once I started looking into this character. And now I can't prove nor do I know whether he was actually of the bloodline, or I can say by that term, Sephardic Jew makes us question because we've looked into that term before. And being from Poland don't really make it easily where we can just overlook that. But I wrote, so the United States borrowed money from the oppression and kidnapping of our people to finance their freedom from Britain while keeping our people in bondage and our souls shackled to their religious sorcery in JC's name. And as I've said many times, as my age is, I've never known freedom in JC's name. Sister, you got something you want to say about what it is I just read there?
Well, we know that the people that are in the land right now, a lot of them come from Poland and that area around there. So we can imagine that this may be one of their people,
Yeah.
but we don't quite know. But it seems as if that is a possibility.
Yes, most likely it could be. Like I said, this guy had enough money that he can lend to the whole entire government and many of the founding fathers to help them do all a host of things that they wanted to do, including support the United States until they can get out on their own. And like I said, they never paid him back. So the next thing we want to talk about is something that the sister mentioned last time she was reading in this study. She mentioned scenario which we talked about before as far as the phoenix. And that's a mythological firebird famous for the extraordinary life cycle and death and rebirth. And the legend is saying that for centuries, this bird builds its nest in the twigs and spices and ignites it in the burst of flames. From these ashes, a new immortal phoenix is reborn. So when the sister mentioned that, I thought about that because Lisbon burned. It burned down to ashes. And in its rebirth after 20 years, sprang up this newly formed colony sponsored by the British, which was strongly tied to Lisbon, but it sprang up. And the things that it had in common concerning slavery and then all this idolatry like we see around this country with they do wicked things and then they decide, you know what, we can't do nothing for your descendants, but you know what, we'll build you a statue. No more of that idolatry practice that we have going on around here in the United States. But um, the funny thing about this phoenix, you can find this phoenix in ancient Egypt, Greece, and many of these other pagan, heathen countries. And so, bringing out that and thinking about it, you can look up the Phoenix and see how far it goes back. So, it has a long history of what they talking about, reinventing your identity and after a period of time being reborn. And it talks about the solar deity, the creation, because this is one of the strange things that is mentioned. Let me see if I can find it. Sissy, can you find that thing where it talks about creation? Because this is tied to some mysticism that you know there's some people who are heavily into that mysticism kind of thing.
So there's talk about creation in ancient Egypt when the sun worship.
Yes.
It says it was believed to have flown over the primordial waters of chaos at the dawn of time, letting out a cry that initiated the cycle of creation.
Mm-hmm. Then it talks about the text links the bird to Ra, the sun god of Egypt. And every evening the sun dies, and every morning this bird bursts forth from the top of a sacred tree to shine light back upon the world. So you see the wickedness of this whole bird and everything. It's not something where they make lightly and then they try to paint it as an eagle. They believe in this foolishness. So we're not going to continue along unless sister got something she want to say about that wicked bird.
Nope.
All right, let's continue on because we're trying to wrap this up because we have something very important that we want to talk to you about at the close of this. So to start out, what we want to do, we want to read again Revelations 18. As we have spoken many times before, we are not saying what you find in this book about Lisbon. What we're saying is when you read Revelations, a lot of the things that are going on in this city and this judgment mirrors some of the things that you see in Revelations 18. And that happened to the city. And what we read in Revelations 18 is going to happen to the whole world. And so what we're saying is when you read this, it's kind of like a foreshadowing. And so we're going to pick up at Revelations chapter 18 and we're going to try to read this through. And then we're going to talk about why it is we shouldn't feel sorry for the city of Lisbon, nor any of their practices, because these things should not be. Sister, you want to tell us what we're going to read and how we want to read it?
I'll just get started.
Okay, get started, sister. I'm right with you. Go ahead.
And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the whole of every foul ruach, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth were waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies.
And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and Yah has remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she has rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. In the cup which she has fill to her double. How much she has glorified herself and have and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is Yahuwah Elohim, who judges her.
And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and live deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babel, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is your judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys her merchandise anymore. The merchants of gold and silver and precious stones, of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all thine wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and of all manner of vessels of precious wood and of brass and iron and marble
And cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and the beasts, and the sheep, and the horses, and the chariots, and the slaves, and the souls of men, and the fruits that of your soul lusted after are departed from you, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and say, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls.
For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried and weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costlessness. For In 1 hour is she made desolate.
20.
Rejoice over her, you heathen, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for Yahuwah has avenged you on her. And
a almighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babel be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more in it at all in you, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in you, and the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in you, and the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in you, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in you, for your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her found the blood of the prophets and of the Codicine and of all that were slain upon the earth. So we read that, and when we read it, it is very profound. If you have listened to this study from the beginning to the end, a lot of things mentioned here actually happened in Lisbon. They actually happened. And to get the flavor of it, you need to go back and start from the beginning and see how this right here lines up with a lot of things that happen. Now, when we finish up here today, we have something very important in which we can't wait to really deliver it, but it's been something that we've been working on, and so that's why we've been a little bit delayed. But you need to understand that when we read in the scriptures, it is not just a past and a future prophecy. There's one in between that. That is a past, a present, and future. It's a living word. Just like you are living. You have a past, a present, and a future. This is the way you need to look at the scriptures. Because when you get the gist of everything that's been put down and put out, you need to understand that there's nothing new under the sun. Some things you might change the name, which they are good at changing names, but some of the practice have never stopped. If the Messiah is going to rule this world, right, for 1,000 years, how long do you think Satan is going to rule it? Because he's been ruling for a long time. I suggest you might get out your calculator and take a look at what's been going on for a long, long time and see that Satan likes to imitate the Messiah. And right now we have one who's imitating him and at least making claims that he is a replacement. So we're going to talk more about that. But right now, in this study, we're not really sure where things are going, but we trust in Yah that he's going to get us to where we need to be. So some of the things that we've been doing have been foundational. And so we want to touch on this subject concerning some of these deities that you found in the city of Lisbon. Sister, you want to tell them the name of this saint, which the Roman Catholic Church called a saint?
Saint Christopher.
And Saint Christopher, do you have an image of what he might look like?
He looks like the Roman
Right here.
that they
Right here.
worship.
Yeah. So a again, when we look at Lisbon, we look at Rome, and we look up Egypt, there's some things that are pretty close to what we find in Egypt. And all these practices that were pagan and concerning the oppression of our people, you found came from Egypt. Now, they'll never admit that because, again, it's only recently they've been claiming so much that they are the founders of Egypt, but these people are not. But this saint had what they call a dog's head. And I think you can read in the Testament of Solomon about how there's a deity with a dog head. But this saint called Christopher is another deity in which they prop up. And I found it funny when I looked up Christopher Columbus. His name wasn't actually Christopher, but it seems like he might have took on that name because this saint that they call him is supposed to be a saint of travel. And we have some documentation on this dude that the Roman Catholic Church put up as saint. And you notice how the Roman Catholic Church think they have the right to call who's a saint and who's of the devil and all these things. They have no authority on that, nor do they know Yah in a personal relationship, but they think they have the right to do that. And sister, you got anything you want to say about this guy, Christopher, besides him having a dog head, sister?
We talked about him being the eye protector
Mm.
and so many other things. He healed diseases of the eye.
Yeah, I'm remembering one thing they said about it. You know, they got many fantastical stories about this mythical people, whether it be him or the Phoenix. They tell the story about this guy named this Christopher guy who saw a young child by the bank and he put him on his shoulder and he carried him across the river. And while he was carrying him, he was talking about the baby was so heavy. And then when he went to the other side of the river, he found out that the baby was holding the weight of the world on his shoulders. Kind of like Atlas, right? You heard about these, right? These great guys or whatever. So they mix these lies and they embellish them and make more lies and it just get more ridiculous. But anyway, he's supposed to be carrying their idol or their god, the baby Jesus or whatever on his shoulder. And he had the world on his shoulder. And that's why he was saying it was so heavy because of course, their imagination just, it goes more than wild. I mean, I think these people need to be institutionalized, but sister, what you got to say?
So it just goes back to we know that these people worship the fallen, the descendants of the fallen angels and the fallen angels, the Nephilim and all that are the alike. They worship them in these entities like Saint Christopher, and they try to prop him up as a saint or a martyr to give him status in their Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
And merge it all in and make it okay, yeah, as they would say. Yeah, it's okay. Because he's a saint. Yeah, you can worship. But we know it's idolatry. Yeah, call on the mother of Jesus Christ and she'll save you and all this kind of it's crazy, man. It's crazy. And then so, I think it's one story they talked about where this dude Saint Christopher went to work for the devil. So we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And so this is just one of many of the principalities that they have propped up in worship. So now we're going to turn, and because what we need you to do, there's a lot of horrific stories concerning Lisbon. Now, in all honesty, we've read most of it, but there's some other parts that we have to finish up in which we're going to try to close out with some of the witnesses where you see revelations and how these people were bemoaning the city or whatever.
we're going to try to cover some of those things, but we're not going to get all of it because we don't need to get all of it. I mean, if you listen and you've heard any of the studies, I know it could be long, but how can you go back and correct some of this stuff that's been out? You have to start from somewhere. And so we started with this book just to give you an idea to show you that these people who believe these ideologies from the Catholic Church, they believe themselves to be under the protection of the Most High. They believe that he ain't gonna judge me for doing all these wicked things in which you're following wicked people, but you haven't done your research to prove whether they are righteous or not. They just claim to be righteous. But we don't want you to feel sorry for some of these people who were in Lisbon for what happened to them. Because what we're going to do now, we're going to read some facts about how they were going around and burning our people, and they've been practicing this for a long time. And like I said, if you do the math, I'm sure it goes back to at least 1,000 years. They've been persecuting our people, and a lot of this stuff is not documented, but it's actual facts. So this is what they've been doing. So the sister has an article which she was very skilled with finding and researching. You probably heard this article before from our brother Binyah Israel. He read it on a couple of times concerning this situation where this family was facing auto da fe for probably no doubt keeping the Sabbath or not eating pork or any of the things that are listed that we should not do according to the scriptures. Our people were killed for doing it. And so she's going to read something concerning that, and then we're going to keep it moving. So,
Okay, it says, there has not been, I am told, an auto da fe at Madrid for these
12.
12 years, which was owing to this circumstance. A Jew and his wife and a daughter of about 13 years of age being condemned to be burnt. While the father and mother were burning, they set the child loose from its fetters, and the priest got round it with a view of converting it by the united force of their rhetoric and the terrors of immediately undergoing the same cruel death. The child, after seemingly to
seeming to listen
a while to their orator.
Okay, I'm gonna pick it up. The child, after seeming to listen a while to their oratory, gave a sudden spring and vaulted into the midst of the fire, giving a shining example of the force of
piety,
of early piety, of a heroic fortitude equal to that of the most resolute Roman, and the most unshaken martyr. So what you're reading here is how it was that they actually pursued our people to get them to convert. And they were talking to this young child who was watching her parents being set to fire. And when they knew that the parents were setting fire and pretty much burning to death. They let her go in an effort to try to coax her and saying, hey, you don't want this. You don't want to be burned up. Go ahead and convert. It won't hurt. It's all right to call on Jesus' name. He's going to save you. He loves you and all these kind of things. Yeah. Jesus loves me. Yes, I know. All these kind of things. They were doing these things while killing Yah's people who were calling on the name of Yahushua and Yah. In an effort to convert him, they were extremely surprised that this child chose, you know what? I'd rather die and be with my parents who loved and feared the Most High, which they instructed her. I'd rather be with them than to be with you wicked devils who would do such a thing. And these are the things that your pastor and all the religious people who call themselves Christians don't want you to know. That's why they discourage people from looking into history, because you realize who the true devil are. The devils are walking among us. And the problem with us is we have given in to the threats of their torture. So much so that they ain't got to do this no more. But if it came right down to it, I have no doubt that they would do it again. So we're going to turn, because we're going to talk more about this kind of situation. But just give you more examples. When you look at the cross burning, it's funny when you look at the things that the Inquisition did. Even after a person was hung and dead, they delighted in burning the bodies. And so that gets back to what you see going on in the United States a few years ago, right? They love to burn the cross. And they would talk about it's lighting the way of our Messiah and all this foolishness. They love burning Yah's people more than they love burning that cross. That cross was an actual threat. That's what it was. When you saw it burning on your lawn, it was a threat. Hey, you gonna be on here just like your Messiah. Well, your Messiah wasn't burned, but at the same time, that was a threat. That they were going to hang you and then they was going to burn you, just like they were doing in Lisbon. So rather than bringing up this topic I was going to bring up about burning crosses and showing how it's linked to what they like to do, we're just going to talk about this hero. This hero who was born in the Kingdom of Congo. Her name was Kempavita, and she was burned at the stake following a trial for her heresy. And you know what her heresy was? Her heresy was going around and telling people that the Messiah was black, his mother was black, and pretty much the people in the book were black. And because she was saying this, they called her a heretic. And they coined, as they normally do, they love to coin and get you in some kind of box. So if you say anything similar, now you're associated with those that they've deemed unworthy. It's kind of like if you hear maybe some of your family members or whatever found out, okay, you want to keep the Sabbath or whatever, they kind of isolate you and put you in a box, and they give you a name, like they call you, you are a black Hebrew Israelite. When I ain't never heard any of those who might call themselves Hebrew Israelites, they never call themselves black. It's just the same as you. When you have something happen in the community, instead of them calling the church, they say a black church. It's this thing where they can label you. Now, once they label you, now they can demonize you, but they need some kind of label. So with Kempavita, they call her someone who practiced Antonianism, Antonia. And then you get to looking at the definition, they always give you some facts, but then they skew it towards something as if she was following Catholicism, in which she was dead set against most of what the Catholic Church was. And most of our people they were killed because they would not accept this white image of a Messiah. So because you would not accept the white image of the Messiah, you're knowing that he's black, they've been killing Yah's people for this fact. And it's like the scriptures tell you not to have idolatry. That's the reason why our people didn't promote this thing. This is something that was born in the heathen church. Once they heard Paul or whoever that was speaking, those who were traveling, teaching our people, they gleaned what they could and they spun off and created their own deity in which they were killing people for simply not accepting idolatry. I remember recently, me and the sister, we went to relatives uh, going home service. And in the back of it, we saw this big old giant mural of this fake Messiah up there on the pane. And it grieves us in our heart to see how our people gave their lives to defend or not to accept this lie. In defense of the truth, they were killed, persecuted, toenails, filleted skin, waterboarded, all these things in an effort to get the hold of people's minds, hearts, and pocketbooks. Is what they troll in right now. There's one thing I looked up. It was concerning something I read. And I know this lady is probably wicked as hell. Okay. But she published these books, and it was called something about Seth. And I remember I saw something written there, and I remember I put it on a shirt because the truth is the truth. It said that those who love righteousness are threatened with violence, and those who love wickedness are threatened with the loss of power and influence. So when you see the Roman Catholic Church and you see this system that they set up that they call holy, anytime there's a threat to their power and their influences on those who are ignorant, they will actually take your life. And you need to know this. They have no problem of taking your life if it's going to shorten their income. This is the wickedness in the mind state of these world and those who follow the materialistic things of this world. See, I have no problem with disagreements or agree with people, whether they on this side, because I don't believe in no chart thing that they talking about. I mean, if they don't have Negro in their blood, I don't see what they talking about. You know what I mean? That's just my personal belief. But I don't think my belief should supersede anyone else where I have the right to kill you. I don't worry about these things because I know that Yahushua is going to straighten it out, right? He's going to straighten out our blood. He's going to straighten out our language differences, whether you call him Yahweh Shai or Yahushua. He's going to straighten these things out. You don't need to worry about those things. What you need to worry about is getting your heart right, making sure your heart aligns with what the scriptures are saying. These are the things that are important. These are the weightier matters of the law. But most of us are fixated on all these things, whether it be your clothing and whether it be these things that you should not be wrestling with. They're just distractions. Work on your heart. Work on your relationship with Yah. These are the things that's going to matter most, right? So when we bring out this whole thing with Kempavita, you realize it's straight wickedness. And they've been doing it for many, many years when you read about the document of this lady, right? So, lastly, we're going to talk about this article where it talks about how it is in Jewish history that wherever they burn books, because they've been after our books and documents for a long time, because the Pope is the one that wants all these books. When I'm saying the Pope, I'm not talking about directly the Pope now, but this institution we call the Roman Catholic Church, they want access to all the books and they want to decipher and decide what goes out. They want control because they know with control comes power and influence. So they've been going through seizing our books and burning them for a very long time. Their effort is to keep you dumb. So when we read the book, The Jews and Moors in Spain, Volume 10, when we read that, you see how it was that European was dumb. And yet and still they're still being dumb. Because there's certain people who are manipulating and using them to go out and attack you, Negro. Mainly because the blood of Yahushua runs through your vein. You don't know who you are, and yet and still you still out amongst them. It's not about your skin color. It's deeper than skin color. It's about your bloodline. And because you don't know who you are, Yah said, because you reject knowledge, he's going to reject you and your children. And so when you see some of the things going on, you understand that Yah ain't going to lie. This rejection comes start with the head of the household. It starts with the father and then it ends at the children. The father, the mother, and the children. It is a line. And until you turn around, what do you expect is going to happen? Except the difference between now and back then is now it can be highlighted through social media. But these things have been going on for a long time. So this article is called Where They Burn Books. All right. You can't see it, but where they burn books, they also burn people. And this is a historical document that you can look up sometime. And it's been going on for a long time because they've been trying to get access to our books that we might not read and study about our Messiah and understand how gravely we are off from what we should be doing. So now that that's been done, please don't feel sorry for some of these things we're about to read concerning Lisbon and the people and the judgment that came on them. So we're going to turn now. We're going to start with that. And once we start with that, we're going to close out and then we're going to talk about this next study that's coming. And it's going to be fantastic. I promise you it's going to be fantastic. And I promise you ain't nobody that I know or me or the sister have ever seen have brought forth this message. But we're going to show you how Yah said that things are not new under the sun. Nothing's new. And we're going to see it. And we're going to show you, based off current events, how these things go back in time and they're still in operation right now. Okay. So, about to read, sister, you ready?
Yep.
All right. Of all the losses suffered in the disaster, few were more heartbreaking for the king. Also destroyed was the palace of the Dukes of Burgundy, the irreplaceable the depository of the royal family. Also still standing after the quake, it was reduced to ashes in the fire, reported Father Portal. And then after that, it lists a whole range of churches, and it's lots of them. But I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. And it says, perhaps the greatest punishment for us, wrote one priest, was the destruction of the city's churches. So profane has these houses of what they call God become in God's eyes, as they call it, that he felt obliged obligated to destroy them and by doing so purify them. Also destroyed by the blaze, according to Montenero, were the monasteries and holy trinities, Our Lady of Carmel, St. Francis, Our Lady of Irish Rosary, the Holy Spirit, Our Lady of Bora, Corpus Christi, mind me, Texas is what it's saying. Okay. Santo Domingo, Santa Eloa, whatever this is, and two majestic and ornate churches, as well as the house of retreat at Castle, and the converted saints and all these different ladies. So they had many different ladies. Like I said, they were just um, spitting saints right out of a hole. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, since you can pick up that next paragraph there, because this is a whole lot of stuff they talking about here.
Lisbon's thick wall cathedral, Santa Maria Major, had suffered horrendous damage in the earthquake, but it was the fire that did it in, destroying all of its chapels, offices, and interior houses. Likewise, it Don Juan
Don John.
Don John Church would succumb to flames, though it had not fallen in the earthquake, according to Father Porter. Its fate was sealed when a tongue of flame leaped from houses belonging to Antonio Bernelli and set it ablaze. It was an incredible thing. Soon after the fire entered one part of the church, it burned completely to the ground and consumed everything inside it, reducing it to powder and ashes. All that was saved was a silver banquet and some candle holders. Unfortunately, the Holy Sacrament was burned and could not be saved. An urn that had contained the patriarch's jewels was found completely intact. However, everything inside had turned to ashes. Neither the venerated statue of the conception of the lady nor the precious set of candlesticks, which had cost 120,000 carousels was ever found. As previously mentioned, a fire broke out on the roof of Church of San Polo and destroyed what was left of the structure and everything inside it, wrote a chronicle.
Now, hold on for a second, sister. I want to say, y'all do remember when we first started reading this, we talked about how these Temple churches in Lisbon had all these jewels and diamond encrusted ceilings and all this immaculates from all the slave trading and everything else they were doing to our people. These churches were amazing. It was more popular to go there than Rome itself, in which all over the world you see all these churches they building more and more seats, more pews, more all this opulence. It came from this place here. This place was shining like no other. They called it the holy city. It had 7 hills. It was all the things that we talk about now. The only thing we recognize now is Rome as a city with 7 hills. But this one here had 7 hills, and it was full of churches. And it had churches with alabaster and gold trim, silver, and rubies, all kinds of things. So that's what you're reading: the destruction of many of these structures, and Yah reduced them to ashes. So we continue on. I'll pick up some of the reading here for the sister. And it says, The only good news was that the Holy Sacrament had been saved and quickly transferred to the Church of San John, whatever this name was. The fire also consumed much of what was left of the enormous complex of
Carmelites.
the Carmelites. Likewise, the ruins of the monastery and the Church of the Trinity were reduced to ashes, and many trapped beneath it were burned alive, according to the Father Portal. Among the victims was a priest found still clutching the vessel that contained the Holy Eucharist, while another deceased cleric was found in the confessional with his right hand raised in the act of giving absolution to the dead penitent at his feet. One priestly corpse was discovered in the ruins surrounded by dead churchgoers, all clutching the clerk's robes. The church that suffered the most damage in the disaster was San Juano, one of Lisbon's oldest house of worship. It was constructed in Baxhill. It had been completely and luxuriously renovated by the 16th century of Don Manuel. On November the 1st, 1755, it experienced almost complete ruin. When the first tremor began, wrote Father Portal, the people fled into the churchyard, after which the church fell and the surrounding houses collapsed and burned almost all the people there. The fire then burned all those trapped beneath the rubble, as well as all the ornaments, wall decorations, silver, and sacred figures on the church, though the statue of Our Lady, whatever, was saved, as well as the church registry. It was an extremely rich parish church whose gilt silver was valued at 50,000 crusoes. Though much silver was dug out of the rubble, it was all burnt. The contagious monastery of St. Juano, run by the venerable community of the poor clerics at St. Juano, also suffered gravely in the blaze. Lost, according to the Father Portal, were enormous quantities of gilded silver, chalices, crucets, and a cross, a censer, an incense boat, a holy water vase, a cross of the hand of the dead, four silver candle holders, and a crown worn by Our Lady, whatever her name is, made of fine stones, and well as ornate tapestry of gold, clothed with which was bordered in gold, worth almost 10,000 crusoes. All were reduced to ashes. Also consumed were many of the homes of the Portugal nobility. So a lot of the wealthy lost their wealth after trading slaves. So as we skip forward on page 172, I'm just going to read this. It says, Chase noted with alarm that many of the Portuguese survivors who had crowded into the massive square believed that Judgment Day had arrived. That's what they were believing, y'all. They thought it arrived. And for them, it did. Because they had been getting away far too long, right? And so we're going to skip ahead to page 178. And I need to mention to y'all, because we're not going to read it, but they like to come up with different terms. Like I said, they like to put us in boxes. So once they corn us, they figure out what it is that turns on their people as far as calling us something. They had this term and they called them ruffians. And ruffians were in another word called evildoers. And many of the people who are locked up in their prisons, they begin to blame these melanated Negro people as the ones who started the fire, believe it or not. Now, if you're familiar with the days and times of the day, like always, when you go shopping, you used to have an old lady or someone following you around in the store. It's always the blacks that did it, right? Y'all couldn't have did this. It had to be you Negroes that went and did something, because this is what they started to try to come out and put out evidence of. And so as you're reading this, they call them gypsies, mauve Bordeaux, or all these different terminologies. They're trying to come up with some kind of excuse as to why this fire started, but they won't explain who sent the wind, though, huh? Okay, but sister, you got something you want to say?
As we know, with Deuteronomy 28, verse 37, it said, and you shall become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword among all nations, where Yahuwah shall lead you. So this is going back to that everywhere our people go, there is going to be a byword for us.
Yep. So you were the ones that they called the ruffians back then. They were the one that they claimed was setting fire to the city and all these different places. It couldn't have been that y'all had too many candles up worshiping your wicked deities and your lady of this and your lady of that, putting all them candles around, had anything to do with the earthquake shaking it and knocking over those candles and starting fires. It couldn't have been that. It had to be one of you with a match. Some of y'all had some lighters in your hand. Y'all was lighting blunts or whatever y'all were doing. Y'all went and set fire to the city over there, and they blamed it on you, as usual. So we're just going to skip ahead and keep on reading. So, like I said, when we first started reading this book, I was just amazed at how many times they kept mentioning scriptures as relate to what was going on in Lisbon. So we're going to read something, and I want you to understand, this thought didn't come from me. It came from many of the priests or whatever that were during that time that were putting out this stuff. So on page 180, they got some scriptures, but this is something else that I want to read. It says, for many survivors, the multiple stages of the disaster were proof that they were witnessing the unfolding of events prophesied in Revelations. This day, November the 1st, 1755, wrote a Portuguese priest, is so similar to that which St. John describes as his apocalypse. So we didn't invent this thing where we were reading about Revelations. They were thinking it. They lived through it. They would know better than we do. So don't take, and point your finger at us like we made up something. No, we're just reading, and a lot of these events, you can't help but to think like, man, this is horrible. But it needed to happen because these people have been getting away and they have lifted up their head against Yah and against his children. They touched the apple of his eye. And they ain't sorry. They still ain't sorry. They were still trying to bring some Negroes for doing it. Wow. Sister, you got anything you want to say?
On page on the next page, it says, echoing the biblical apocalypse and employing an historical logic that united
Aristotle's.
physics with Christianity. One Portuguese cleric described the fires as the final blow from the sword of divine justice, in which each assault corresponded to the four elements of earth, water, air, and fire. In much the same way, another cleric argued that the four vices of vanity, arrogance, anger, and lust had compelled the Most High to deliver his punishment using the four elements in which each was matched to a different vice.
Wow. Y'all, we are seeing witnesses of all sorts come forth and say that this right here was something that they could never imagine, nor have we seen the likes of it in our time lately to this kind of destruction and complete as it was. So we're skipping ahead. So me and the sister are going to do some leapfrogging and try to clear out some of these things that we might want to mention because we don't know when we might get another opportunity to cover this. We do have some plans for some things that we skipped over. We immediately just jump right over because we don't want to deal with it right now. We have something more important and that we want to do with that. So I'm skipping ahead to 183 and I want to read this section here because you're going to get something similar to what we read in Revelations. For many, Lisbon's reputation for wickedness was a central was as central to its fall as the scope and the scale of the disaster itself. As a moral and human tragedy of epic proportions, the Lisbon earthquake would, many believe, join the ranks of history's greatest catastrophes and cautionary tales. Throughout the first days, survivors from the city arrived in fields, their clothes torn. They were covered in dirt, filthy, bloody, bruised, mistreated, and disfigured by fear, recalled a priest. Some appeared as if they had just been exhumed, dug up from the grave, right? Wrote another survivor. Here we see none of the people who either stared or looked down, despondent. Whole minds are possessed by the fear or grief, adding an eyewitness. They entered each other with the most frightening tale and the most dismal predictions. One bewailed his own misfortune, another the cruel fate of his friends and relations, and they almost bitterly wept over their dear Lisbon, which from one of the most opulent cities in the world is become the center of woe and misery. Wow.
Now, it's interesting that that last part you said is become the center of woe and misery.
Mm.
That kind of lines up with something we read earlier.
Yes, it does. That's why I thought it was important that we read it because um, we're not making this up. We're just reading what's there. And the reason why you don't hear a lot about it is because um, some people, because of pride, they need this sense of invincibility. Even though they were serving a wicked deity and their their Messiah ain't our Messiah, they need their Messiah to be winning. And their Messiah is the Messiah of lawlessness, as they preach many times in the pulpit. You know what I mean? The law is done away with. That's their Messiah, the one that he don't establish nothing. You know, you can kind of do away with it. You say one thing and mean another. You know, the hypocrisy kind of thing. So uh, we're going to go forward and we're going to get into some of this spreading word that came around the world, and then hopefully we can close out with something. Sister, you want to skip ahead and we're going to leapfrog from place to place. So y'all, just hold on. We, like I said, we're closing out. So let's just read some of these witnesses so you can hear how this impacted different situations, different people around the world, or even in the very same region. So, sister, just take your time.
Okay. In regards to the word spreading, On the morning of November 4th, a lone carrier carrying packets stuffed with letters boarded from the still burning Capitol and went forth on a journey to deliver letters to different people. So he went first. He had letters. One of the relatives of the leaders, it says, perhaps no phrase uttered in the aftermath of the disaster proved more discerning to the 18th century sensibilities than Don's often quoted words to the Spanish throne. I am without a house and a tent, without servants, without subjects, without money, without bread. He informed Fernando, his brother in law, and Maria, his older sister. And then you can jump down further, and it talks about within hours, he and Maria dispatched their first shipment of aid to Belém and gave orders, according to the news account, to supply the Portuguese court with everything else that would be wanted. They send as much ready money every day as the messenger can carry, wrote King. And Don Fernando's letter to his sister, Queen Maria Victoria, offers her king can ask and can send to facilitate the flow of goods and royal cash, which may have totaled as much as 150,000 pieces of eight, or about 37, looks like, pounds. Fernando established all tariffs along the Spanish-Portuguese border. It was the opening act of the first international relief effort in world history.
Sister, you just read that, and that's exactly what I was thinking. This is the first in history foreign aid. Now, you know how the scriptures talk about how these people are Confederates against us. You're seeing the Confederates who have been involved with the enslavement of our people and the displacement and the oppression of our people coming together to support one another because of this wickedness. Right? Now, the funny thing is, when you look at it, yeah, now you see the same framework right now today. But I'm going to read something concerning London or England, because England was the bosom buddy. It's also the bosom buddy of what we used to call in this country our emperor and king. But likewise, this is what the mind state was in Lisbon. I'm going to read this part. Because this happened in November, so it's talking about December, and once the word started getting out, and I skipped ahead. I think I'm on page 243, sisters. So here we go. And it says, back in London, the mood remained subdued, if not downright gloomy. At White's, the notorious gentlemen's club, the betting stakes had been sharply reduced, and masquerade ball had been abolished across the city for fear of provoking the Almighty's wrath. Though a reader of the Lisbon Evening Post remarked in the early December that the playhouses in all conventicle and vanity and wickedness are as crowded as ever. So they still doing their thing, but they ain't want to have no masquerade party. On December the 18th, George II called for the general fast to be held on February the 6th in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. So the king asked for a fast. Let's see. From the deepest sense of the miseries of which our people would suffer if a like visitation should be shrewd forth upon these kingdoms, and placing our whole truth and confidence in the mercy of the Almighty, and they put God, we have resolved that the general and public fast be observed, that both we and our people may humble ourselves before the Almighty God, and in the most devout and solemn manner send up our prayers and supplications to the divine majesty to divert all those judgments which we most justly have deserved, to continue his mercies, and to perpetuate the enjoyment of the Protestant religion among us, and safety and prosperity to our kingdoms and dominions, and to implore the protections and blessings upon our fleets and armies. Now, what happened in Lisbon so shocked the world, as I said one time, and my sister said, that it changed things. This right here was the catalyst that got them to stop slave trading, but they ain't stopped their wickedness. Like I said, Yah still got some more. They needed to continue so that we can get to this point now. And this point right now is part of the awakening. And I'm going to talk about it later as far as one of the things that we have to do, since we are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. We have to get knowledge. And knowledge and understanding comes from Yah, and that comes from seeking Him and asking Him to show you what you need to do and what you need to say to people to get them to understand that all this information and all this history matters. Because when you got enough of this information and history, you can see how the arc of what Yah is bringing into pass is going to play in your future. You might not understand it right now, but your job right now is to get knowledge. And one of the main things you need to do is get an understanding that Yah has always been on your side and working towards that. You just need to convince those who are lost and bring them back towards some sense of wisdom, to not put themselves in danger by hanging out with people they shouldn't be hanging out with, because you can't trust them. So, sister, you got something else you want to bring? Because I'm gonna keep on skipping ahead. We're gonna keep on skipping ahead till we get to the end of this, y'all.
I got here, no country reacted to the news of Lisbon disaster with a more genuine horror than the free and Asiatic city of Hamburg, situated at the confluence of the Elbe and the Alster rivers in North Germany. The proud little trading republic had been an important commercial center since the Middle Ages, and the original member of the Hanseatic League. By the middle of the 18th century, Hamburg was the third wealthiest trading hub for the North Europe after London and Amsterdam. On All Saints' Day, 1755, there were more merchants from Hamburg living in the Portuguese capital than from any other nation other than Great Britain.
Mm.
The first report of the earthquake on November 1st to reach Hamburg appeared in the city's leading newspaper on November 8th, 1755.
Mm. Okay. So let me read this right here so you can understand how these people needed to control what was coming out in the world because, like I said, the friends, like London and such, they knew what happened. But before the sister got to that, there was another part. After I read the part about London, it mentioned China, it mentioned Holland, it mentioned Dutch, and some other places where this news was getting out. So this is what happened when they realized how bad things was. They didn't want people to turn away from Christianity because that was the bread and butter. So it says in this post, it talks about the Spanish and English ambassador. Let me go back and read this right here. Then, in the late evening on November the 28th, letters arrived from France told of a very great earthquake at Lisbon, recalled the British ambassador to Hamburg. Sister just mentioned that, right? And it says the next day, the correspondent published the first German account of the disaster. In just 7 minutes, half of the city had been destroyed, and 100,000 people, including the papal nunci and the Spanish and English ambassadors, had died. Now, this is what they were saying. With the next post, we will have further details about this misfortune, which has been equally great for the merchants from many different kingdoms and cities. Then it says, 3 days later, the correspondent ran in the Splitzenberg or whatever, I guess it's German, news lead on the front page describing disaster with all its horrible details and unhappy consequences. But there was good news as well. The papal nunci had in fact survived, and the number of fatalities had been reduced to 50,000. In January, that number would drop to only 5,000. As a result, the letter from a very good hand was this none other than somebody who we not try to mention. We ain't going to mention him to another time, but somebody else had a very stern control on what was saying out. Remember, it said 100,000, then they went to 50,000, and then in January, from December to January, it ended up being 5,000. And that's why when we was reading the numbers kept changing. It kept changing. It kept manipulating. Like I said, there was an individual who was behind this whole manipulation and keeping out the numbers where you can't even get accurate numbers of who died. And don't forget that I mentioned that the Roman Catholic Church did not count children. It was against the law to count children amongst the dead because they want you to think that, God is on their side. They could not let out the news that there were children and little ones dead in this horrific event. They could not allow that to happen. So we're going to skip ahead, as we said. You can go ahead and read that, sister.
So it's talking about a guy named Frederick. His last name was Hoverstock. He was a poet, a famous poet, German, and he wrote some things, and this is what was said about him. Frederick's Stanifar, notwithstanding, there seemed an almost insatiable desire among his Persian subjects and Germans in general for news and information about the disaster. In 1755 and 1756, publishers in the Brilsa produced a series of 12 numbered pamphlets entitled Accounts of the Frightening Lisbon Earthquake, which extracted letters and eyewitness reports from various European newspapers. Also appearing, as in other countries, were hundreds of sermons, essays, and poems on the catastrophe by preachers, poets, and scholars, as well as several large comprehensive volumes, which, in addition to detailed descriptions of the disaster, provided an overview of history, culture of Lisbon and the Portuguese Empire. They fled, they fed a growing interest among the Germans in the importance and uses of history, a trend that would culminate in the revolutionary advances in German and ultimately European his, historical scholarship in the next century.
Hmm.
So this event, as you see, touched all over the world, from Germany to um, many different cities. And so we're just showing you these accounts to show you how it affected so many people.
You read that? I'm going to skip over here. I'm gonna read this part, and you can read over that first part. So I'm going to skip ahead, and the sister she may read the next part before I get there. I'm reading at the bottom of the page, and it says, "While the earthquake had set destruction in motion, it was the fourth element, fire. Recall one eyewitness that caused the most consternation, and which, without exaggeration, burned the largest and the best parts of Lisbon. The fire," affirmed Mr. Broderick, "may be said to have destroyed the whole city, at least everything that was grand or valuable in it. In the opinion of one Portuguese priest, it was the disaster's greatest theft. Abraham Castro estimated that the conflagration did the 10 times more mischief than the earthquake itself, a reckoning that was repeated in numerous broadsheets and newspapers at the time. On the other hand, if no fire had broken out, some sections of Bacchial would have suffered only moderate damage, and many treasures would have been recovered from the rubble. On the new street of the merchants, only a few houses initially fell, wrote Father Portal. But after the fire swept through the backfield, it was completely reduced to ashes. It burned those that had fallen as well as those that stood still, wrote another priest. It was the cruel executioner of the people of Lisbon, a barbarous element, a tyranny.
The damage on this occasion can't be estimated, but it must have been immense. All of the fine tapestry, paintings, plate, jewels, furniture, and contents of the king's palace, amounting to many millions, with the riches, with the rich vestments and costly ornaments of the patriarchal church adjoining, where the service was performed with no less pomp than that of the Pope's own chapel. All the riches of the palace of Braganza were the crown jewels and plate of inestimable value with quantities of the finest silk tapestry interwoven with gold and silver thread and hangings of velvet and damask were kept. All the good, all the rich goods and spices in your warehouses under the palace. Those belonging to the merchants of different nations in the opposite custom house, as well as those in the merchant's own house. The dispersed among the numerous shops were utterly consumed or lost.
Mm-mm-mm. So it continues on. And it talks about this king they had. They called him likened to the new King Solomon, right? I think his name was Pedro or something like that. But anyway, it goes on to say uh, it talks about the discovery of gold mine in Brazil, which is more of our people's land. They were introduced into Portugal such a great luxury of things that each palace was a private treasury, as much in paintings and tapestries as other precious things. And so it was possible to estimate the general loss included that of foreigners at 1,200 million in whatever this currency is. If one adds to this, wrote one Lisbonian, the jewels, precious stones, gilded silver of the crown, and that the private hands, the churches, and the religious communities, one reached the sum that exceeds all imagination, because of the court in Lisbon was the richest in Europe in precious stones, and it lost all of them, except those that the royal family had with them at the time of the disaster. Indeed, the two streets where the richest goldsmiths and diamond settlers lived. Lived. They, were those that suffered the most in the earthquake and the fire. And the estimation 200 diamond shops were completely burned under the ruins. Almost, also lost were priceless suits of armor, wrote Father Portal, especially those of the royal treasury belonging to His Majesty, jewels of incomparable value, diamonds, pearls, emeralds, every kind of precious stone, as well as gold, silver, paintings, and statues. Moreover, the great cupola of the Indian house fell in the violence of the fire and was reduced to ashes as one of the principal centers of the commerce in Lisbon. The India house alone held 11 or 12 million crusoes worth of diamonds, reported Portal, as well as silver in immense quantities of gold, of which only a small quantity was ever recovered. In addition, most precious contents of the tsunami damaged custom house was consumed in the blaze. And a letter to the Portuguese Secretary of State for Overseas Affairs, more than 1 million of them, as far as money, in the fire, which reduced the customs house to ashes with all the goods that had been sent on the earlier fleet. So they had lost everything. And it continues on. That's not all of it. There's a lot more here talking about all this prestige and stuff they had been collecting from around the world, mostly from selling Negroes in slavery. This is where this money was coming from. And of course, working them without any kind of payment. So, again, it's mentioned many things as far as the slave trade. On the next page here, it's talking about the custom house. So when you hear about the custom house, that's a place where sailors would register their goods that they brought in. And so here, I'm seeing something about exports, please, slaves. Go ahead, sister. What you got?
So, along with a lot of dainty things that were lost, such as uh, paintings and tapestries, they also report that vast collections of public records and private records were lost in the blaze. Also, books that were written, great libraries were burned to the ground. These archives held material from way back many years. They were lost. And it says here in the Carmite monastery, the fire destroyed not only the great library, wrote Father Portal, but the individual cells of the priests with all of their book collections, papers, and furniture, as well as the archive, which was an irreparable loss.
Hallelujah. It's crazy. Um, it's crazy how this fire destroyed everything. And one of the things it destroyed, as far as the custom house, was the records. So in this part here, I'm just going to read very shortly. In the seven commodities custom house, which administered the import and the export fees for slaves, coal, wood, fruit, meat, and fish, olive oil, and wine. Only a handful of records survive, while the Grand Customs House for sugar were imported, exported duties were determined from the Brazilian sugars. Only 5 receipt books from the first half of the 18th century have come down to us. So all these records and things were lost. So we continue on because we have a few more sections and then we're just going to close out. We're going to let you read it for yourself. Like I said, there's a lot more details. So I'm over here at 274. You see that, sister? I'm trying to see what's there.
It says, but all of the property lost in the disaster, the most widely and deeply mourned by the Lisbonians, were the thousands of beloved statues, sacred paintings, crosses, and relics with their holy contents. In the church of Santo Domingos, according to one of the heartbroken chroniclers, the fire consumed all of the sacred statues and images, including the ancient and much venerated statue of the crucified persons, and
Lord. Word.
also well as that of the Lady of the Rosary and the beautiful Lady of the Virtues. According to one of the fathers, some of these sacred objects were broken into pieces, others were burned, others were burned below the rubble and never found, such as the intensity of the veneration for these objects that it is rather difficult to assign a meaningful modern value to their loss. This reminds me of a story of Abram, before he became Abraham,
Uh-huh.
and he destroyed all of his father's statues and idols for Yahuwah.
Mm.
And this just goes to show that Yahuwah will not give his glory to another. So when he destroyed this city, a lot of their gods, idols, were destroyed by the earthquake, the water, or the fire. They were all destroyed.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, it's good, y'all. He's good. He might not be good to the wicked, but he's good. Okay. So I'm gonna pick it up and I'm gonna keep on reading. And it says, unfortunately, in many cases, they proved no match for the destruction forces of the earthquake and fire. The contents of some were destroyed and burned to ashes, and many collections of coins found inside them were melted, so that they could not be used again and had to be melted down. The fire's duration explains some of the unsparing destruction. While most survivors agree that the principal blaze lasted between 5 to 15 days, new evidence suggests that several fires continued to burn more than 6 weeks in various parts of the city. One of the best sources of this question is the correspondence of Monsignor, whatever his name is, recently discovered that in the Vatican Library, letters provide the reliable and detailed records of the size and duration of the blaze. So when we doing that and it talks about 6 weeks, we're talking about 40 days and 40 nights. That sounds familiar to some of you biblical fans. 40 days and 40 nights. This fire was burnt. That's a long, long time. Dang. Then it says, I'm reading, skipping ahead. To this, one must add the vast wealth lost inside Lisbon's churches, financed through royal and noble patronage. The opulent interior of the capital's churches include all the sacred vessels, ornaments, furniture, statues, paintings, according to the French source, were one of the reasons of Lisbon's status as one of the richest cities of the world. Also generally encountered is the wealth loss in the area of I don't know the name of this thing. Um, whew, the public tribunals, the custom house, the India house, and where most of the merchants dwelled from the convenience of transactions, their business is nothing but a heap of rubbish in many places, several stories high. Now, the public, the tribunals, that's where they were burning our people. The custom house, that's where they were selling our people. The merchants, that's were the ones that was buying and selling our people. All these things ended up being a heap of rubbish, many stories high. Now, why do you think it was happening so bad to these areas? Did it have something to do with you messing with y'all's people? But you people don't believe that, huh? You still believe it's somebody else, huh? You gonna keep on believing what you believe until the same judgment comes on the whole entire world. Till you get it through your head. Ain't nobody getting away with nothing. Even if we weren't the people, you should repent for what you did to my people. Whether they was Yah's chosen people or not. You had no business doing it. And you still gonna pay for it. So, sister, I'm going to skip ahead and I'm saying, add to this the riches found inside the patriarchal church and all merchandise and the trade records of the custom house, the India house, and the royal courts, and one could conservatively double the guy's estimates of the losses in this area to 8,000, whatever this continent is. We don't know what this currency value is, but it's talking about some large numbers that these people lost due to selling our people. And it says since 1734, when the Portuguese crown set up a diamond region in Brazil called Turuchco, whatever that is, and granted monopoly rights to certain individuals for diamond extracts there, smuggling and illegal mining were rampant. Uh, consequently, a large percentage of all the diamonds entered into Portugal from Brazil were never reported. But the diamonds weren't the only precious gems mined in Brazil and brought to Portugal. Emeralds and sapphire also arrived in large quantities, both legal and illegal. The total loss of all the precious gems were closer to this 5,000 counteds. So we got two more. Uh, we got about 4 paragraphs to finish up. This one guy, I don't know his name here. He's talking about his fortune.
So as you see, there's a lot of accounts here that you can read on your own that talk about what people lost and how great this disaster was. But to close it out, I would like to go to page 297 at the bottom of the page, and it talks about some other things that happened to the people of Lisbon during this time.
Okay.
And it says that several were injured during a disaster. The account states 40 to 50,000 people were injured. And to this number, one can add all those who died of infectious diseases like pneumonia, influenza, measles, as well as various waterborne and diarrheal afflictions like leprosy, hepatitis A, hepatitis E. Although there were no reports of major outbreaks of diseases immediately after the disaster, and intended several studies suggest that communicable diseases epidemics are less common in the aftermath of disasters than one might suppose. There was a newspaper account of a cholera epidemic that occurred in Lisbon in June 1756, which apparently claimed the lives of many people, as well as an outbreak of the plague. It was therefore not unreasonable to assume that in the cramped, unsanitary conditions of the camps that led after this horrific event, at least several thousands uncompromised survivors died of illnesses. Like many of those who later succumbed to stress or injury, one suspects that few of the victims were officially or unofficially counted as disaster deaths by either the church or the government.
Wow. To determine the overall death toll in Lisbon, one should add the estimated 2,000 people visiting Lisbon for the feast day. who died in the disaster, the 3,000 whose bodies were lost in the ruins, burned, or swept out to sea and never counted, and 5,000 people who died from the injuries of disease in the months after, in the event of Perry's base estimated 30,000 deaths. The result of 40,000 deaths, the same number provided by these other two guys. Thus, 38, 19% of Lisbon's pre-earthquake population, the 200,000, perished in the disaster. Normally, such a high percentage would strain credulity, but the Lisbon disaster was exceptional in that it was actually three distinct disasters. Of the 40,000 total victims, approximately 25 perished in the earthquake, 7,000 in fire, 3,000 in tsunami, and additional 5,000 later died of their injuries or disease. Over 100 years after the disaster, Lisbon's population was just 190,000, about 10,000 fewer what it had been before the earthquake. I would suggest to you, I wouldn't trust none of their numbers. These people can't be honest, and why would they be honest? Sister, you got something you want to say?
So, outside Portugal, there were also many deaths. In Spain, the official death tally, as already mentioned, was approximately 1,214. But again, many victims of the tsunami were likely not reported. And as in Portugal, small children were probably not included in the death records. It thus seems probable that the number of Spanish victims was actually closer to 2,000. The other country that suffered a substantial number of deaths was Morocco, which bore the full brunt of both the earthquake and the tsunami. Unfortunately, reliable death records for North Africa do not exist or have yet to be discovered. Some accounts from the region conflate the All Saints' Day earthquake with the earthquake on November 18th, which was felt through large sections of Europe, as well as the powerful Meekness earthquake of November 27th. In any case, the death toll in Morocco on November 1st was no doubt considerable. Therefore, if anyone estimates that roughly 10,000 people died across Morocco, and add the 50 or so people who might have died in the West Indies in the tsunami, and another 100 possible deaths in places scattered across the Atlantic and in the islands, and in that, then add the three reported fatalities in Brazil, you would obtain a grand total of 53,000 plus.
So, again, we don't have an accurate number of how many died. I think we'll never have an accurate number. But we know that this was so significant that the people who are witnesses are priests of all kinds of walks that were in Lisbon who seen this thing, and that's their testimony. You don't have to trust or believe us. All you have to do is just look at the documented information. Again, this guy name is Mark Molesky. He did an excellent job of compiling this information, and we're just bringing it to you because nobody else will. Now, in closing with this study, we never really know where we're going as far as the messages that we might bring. I know it's been like 2 months since the last time we put out anything concerning this book, but we have not planned this, but it kind of worked in our favor as far as y'all giving us something to bring forward to you. So we should have something very shortly coming out concerning the this overall message. The message is come out from among them and be ye separate. And from this, we have grown in our understanding. Once you have understanding certain things, you go back to the scriptures. And when we look at the scriptures now, it's more profound revelations when we look at it concerning this time period, because this time period was very important. Um, as we see it, as you know, as during the time of Jacob's trouble, this was much trouble where we were being criminalized, tortured for doing the very thing that's written in your scriptures. And even now, so today, we're still being persecuted and talked about in a very odd ways when it comes to being obedient. All this sacrifice that some people are making, yet they can't be obedient. And they're going to find out in the shock to them that they're not going to be counted worthy because they will not be obedient to what Yah is saying. And so we have a message that we want to bring out. It's going to be a lot shorter. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of the things we've done are foundational. So you can see our perspective. And for me and the sister, we think a little bit different than a lot of people that are out here. We trust what Yah is saying, and He has us on a mission right now that I'm very happy to be on, because a lot of people don't have this understanding that we recently received. So we definitely want to bring it out and show you what Yah has shown us. And again, we appreciate and we thank y'all for um, being along with us. For this is our first real um, extended series. We've done a series before that was very short, maybe like 3. But this is number 5, y'all. And we thank you for this ride, and we thank you for allowing us to read to you guys this book. Somebody's got to do it, right? And we thank Yah for giving us the opportunity to bring it to you. And Sister, you got anything you want to say before we close out this study here?
Repentance is key.
Yeah.
Repentance is key.
Yeah. So with that closing, our next message will be about this repentance and what we might need to do as far as our next steps, and how do we get back, because we don't want to see our people go through this state of confusion and not understanding what's going on. So our message is again, come out from among them and be ye separate.
Hallelujah.
And we say hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Thank y'all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. All praises to the Most High.